Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa, and welcome to Threshold of Hope, a program where we take a look at the writings of the church. And before we get to Fides et Ratio, I want to mention that today is the feast of Saint Teresa of Avila. She was born in 1515, entered a Carmelite convent, came from a fairly well-to-do family, and as was common, well-to-do women entered the convent with their own servants. And she had a fairly easy life as a Carmelite. But as she got into her late 30s, she began to experience a conversion and began to live a very serious life and began a reform of the Carmelite order. And this reform was absolutely fantastic and did some great renewal. And, you know, there are a lot of great saints who brought the church into being, who suffered persecution and underwent martyrdom. And we have nothing but the highest admiration for them. But then, you know, sometimes success of the church, when everybody becomes Catholic and then begins to take it for granted, also takes place. And Saint Teresa is someone who's a saint for that kind of situation, because she reformed Catholics and did a tremendous job by calling them to deeper self-knowledge in the presence of God, and come to know Jesus Christ better and better, so that even though they're Catholic, they need deeper conversion. And that's one of the great things she did, and we need that in every place where Catholicism is already common. Now, I want to mention that EWTN's religious catalog carries a number of books and videos for all ages about Saint Teresa of Avila. She is a great doctor of the church. So check these out by going to EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, and you can find out more there. Okay? All right. Well, let's now get to Fides et Ratio. This is by Blessed John Paul II. And you can also get this hard copy in paperback of this encyclical, Fides et Ratio. Just go to EWTN's religious catalog. And again, EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, or you can call them 1-800-854-6316. Or you can also download a free electronic copy of Fides et Ratio in the document library of our website, EWTN.com. Go to the Faith tab, click that on, you'll see Documents Library. Type in Fides et Ratio, and you can download it for free into your computer and read from your computer, or print it out and read with us. But you have to pay for your own printer. All right. Now, of course, I want you to be involved and participate in our show. You can do like these nice folks have done and come here to Birmingham, or you can send us your question by writing an email to threshold@EWTN.com, or call us during our live broadcast, which is on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And the phone number you can call during the live broadcast is 1-800-221-9460. Or you can also call, if you're local here in Birmingham, or if you're outside the country, call 205-271-2980. Look forward to your calls. We are on paragraph 25.2 of this encyclical. And he begins, you know, we talked last time, we began with a quote from Aristotle, who said, all human beings desire to know. Again, that's a good thing. And we want to understand the way the world works. We want to understand the theories. We want what is true. But now he also brings out that in addition to the theoretical field, people also want to research the practical areas of life. And here he doesn't mean technology. He's talking about the search for truth, which looks to the good which is to be performed, so that you try to understand what is true and good in your behavior. So this is talking about ethics and morals, so that you know right from wrong, bad from good. And then try to do what's good and avoid what's bad. In acting ethically, according to a free and rightly tuned will. That's a very important element. To be able to do good, you have to have free will. You know, animals, as much as we love them, they do what they do by their own instincts. Oh, they sort of know that, you know, they're not supposed to, you know, go into the bag of food and knock it down and eat. You know, they know, they get that look when they're caught, especially dogs. My cats get a little bit of that look too, but they don't really have free will. They're just following their instinct that, you know, if I can figure out where the food is and I can get it, I'm going to get it. That's all they think. They don't think I need to share with all the cats in the neighborhood. That's hardly their goal. No human beings are capable of freedom and of rightly tuning the will. And in so doing, the human person sets foot upon the path to happiness and moves toward perfection. So that when you do what is good, you will find happiness. And the greater good you do, the more happiness you'll have. Now, of course, goods of different kinds come along, and some things seem to be better than they are at the time. So, for instance, it may seem to be good to possess a Rolls Royce, but if you don't pay for it and you steal it, it may seem good to drive a wonderful car, but it won't be good for very long because you'll get caught and spend a lot more time in jail than you ever did in the Rolls Royce. So this is something that you look for, the greater good that moves toward moral perfection. And that's your goal. You know, it's not, you know, my personal goal. It's one that Jesus, our Lord, set in Matthew 5:48. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. That's the goal. We don't all get there very well, but we keep working toward that. And not, the Lord didn't say, be so-so. Be okay. Be nice. No, none of those are in my gospel or yours. In that, here we see that it's a question of truth. Now, that's not easy for the modern world to deal with, because a lot of modern people do not believe that there is such a thing as moral truth unless you do something that offends them. Then they get pretty serious. But, you know, it's a problem. I remember in an academic journal some years ago that history professors were finding that their college students were saying, well, you know, I couldn't kill the Jews, gypsies, and homosexuals in concentration camps. But maybe the Nazis thought that was right, which they did. But did that make it right? No. So this is something very important. And that's why Pope John Paul wrote in his encyclical, an earlier encyclical, Veritatis Splendor, paragraph 34, quote, there can be no morality without freedom. Although each individual has a right to be respected in his own journey in search of the truth, there exists a prior moral obligation, and a grave one at that, to seek the truth and to adhere to it once it is known. Now, by the way, this, I don't know if you've been following the news on how they report Pope Francis' statements. You know, most of the newspapers that report what he says don't read what the Pope said. They read what the New York Times says that he said. And we need to be smarter than the newspaper reporters. And you see that it's very much that each individual has a right to be respected in his own journey in search of the truth. That's why he said you have to follow your own conscience. But also he said, I'm a son of the church, and I teach what the church teaches. And it's for the same reason, because there is a prior moral obligation to seek the truth and to adhere to it once it's known. Some truths are very inconvenient. We don't like them. Thieves don't like to hear the commandment, thou shalt not steal. Adulterers don't like, thou shalt not commit adultery. And in general, I remember when I was superior of a community, people would say, we need to cut back in some of the kinds of food we buy. But it was always the people who didn't drink soda pop wanted to get rid of that. Well, the people who didn't eat cookies wanted to get rid of that. Don't gore your own ox now. Come on. And so we don't like, when certain things impact us. But that doesn't mean it's not true, and it doesn't mean that we don't have a moral obligation to do it because it is true, whether I like it or not. Therefore, it's essential that the values chosen and pursued in one's life be true. You have to make that a goal. Sure, I'm going to learn more and more about the truth. But that must be my goal. The goal is not, well, I just want to do whatever I feel like doing. That is not sensible. That is usually what we call being a psychopath or a sociopath. They do whatever they want right before they go to jail. The reason for this is only true values can lead people to realize themselves fully. Only true values allow them to be true to their nature. I see that's going to be one of the points of standard Catholic teaching about morality, is that morality is about the truth of who you are. I'll give you a quick example. Eating food is meant to nourish you, correct? Now, there are a lot of different nourishing foods that taste very, very good. There's some nourishing foods that don't taste quite as good. And there are some unnourishing, even harmful foods that taste absolutely fantastic. Okay? Is that not true? And so then we have to realize, do I eat food primarily to please my palate, which is the organ of taste, or to bring food to my stomach for my own nourishment. Even the prophet Isaiah said that fat tastes good, but too much fat is not good for you. You know, potato chips taste good. You can't just eat one. But, you know, you have to, and pop and all that stuff. But, you know, not all of it is good. And broccoli and cauliflower are not one of the best tasting things. That's why you don't see broccoli flavored ice cream. I used to tease my niece and nephew that we'll get some broccoli ice cream with cauliflower topping. They didn't think that was a good idea. But this is something that we see, that we have to realize the true values of what we're made to do. See, that's why I bring up this issue of food. Your stomach was made for nourishment, not just to satisfy the palate, which is a different organ. So also the whole body is oriented towards certain truth about itself, its own purposes. The mind was meant to learn things and not just play video games. The mind or the heart was meant to be used and not just to help you breathe while you sit on the couch. And there are all sorts of things. Human sexuality is made for procreation. You know, that's its purpose. And, you know, that's denied today. Just like, you know, some people deny that the stomach is made for nourishment, but only for the palate is why they eat food. So these things have to be dealt with. And the truth of values is not found by turning in on oneself, but by opening oneself to apprehend that truth, even at levels that go beyond the person's limits. That the truth, you know, is beyond me, so that there has to come a point that, you know, every child must realize that the factories don't make all the toys just for me. They're there to share. Yes, it's my ball, but what good is it if I don't share? Its purpose is to throw it to someone. And this is going to be true with the rest of moral truth, that it's not all about me, it's beyond me. And that it's about others and about God ultimately. This is an essential condition for us to become ourselves and to grow as mature adult persons. You know, is that when you look at self-centered people, do we not readily identify them as immature? Selfishness keeps you immature. How many people are, you know, avoiding things like realities like marriage and a full-time job because they don't want to grow up? There's even a book called The Peter Pan Principle about how some people simply won't grow up, they won't go to school, they won't mature. Again, some weeks ago I mentioned a young man in his late 20s who just wants to live off of welfare and surf and play music badly in his garage. Badly, in my opinion. It goes on in paragraph 26. The truth comes initially to the human being as a question. The basic question is, does life have a meaning? And where is life going? Now, we don't usually ask that question when we're real small. We're just running around finding out what's out there. But there does come a point in which each person does ask that question, and the mature ones go into the issue deeply. Now, some immature ones, the atheists and such, they say, oh, it's just meaningless. There's no purpose, so just enjoy what you can. And it keeps them immature. But mature people ask that question. What's the meaning of life? Where's it going? At first sight, personal existence may seem completely meaningless. And you think of how many people who don't say, no, I just go out there, get a job, go to school to get a job, and then get a job so I can get a retirement, so that the state government can spend my retirement on other projects and then keep me going back to work, right? And all you those listening out there know the states I'm talking about. So it seems meaningless, the purpose of all that. And we don't necessarily have to turn to the philosophers of the absurd, people like Jean-Paul Sartre and Camus and others, who just saw life as meaningless. There's no purpose except just to be able to express that I have freedom. And even then, Jean-Paul Sartre said that all through his life, he struggled constantly not to commit suicide, as famous as he was. And we don't have to go to the provocative questioning found in the book of Job in order to have doubts about life's meaning. You know, in Job, the issue is, why do I suffer? Why do I go through this misery? What did I do wrong? Is there any purpose to it? The daily experience of suffering, suffering in our own lives, suffering in the lives of people around us, and especially we notice it in the lives of people we love when they suffer. But we can even think of people who are suffering because of, say, the tsunami or disease or some other thing that they didn't cause. Now, what's the purpose? And the array of facts in life, the various kinds of things we can know that are inexplicable to reason. We don't, we look at a lot of things and wonder, why do whole planets get destroyed? Why did a meteor hit the earth and wipe out all the dinosaurs? Though such questions generally are asked by little boys who haven't lived around big alligators or crocodiles, and they would know. Well, it's not so great to have them around. But they seem inexplicable. And it seems that the question of meaning cannot be evaded. And he talks about this in his another one of his writings, Salvifici Doloris, his letter on suffering, paragraph 9, where he says, whereas the existence of the world opens, as it were, the eyes of the human soul to the existence of God, to his wisdom, power, and greatness, yet evil and suffering seem to obscure this image, sometimes in a radical way, especially in the daily drama of so many cases of undeserved suffering and of so many faults without proper punishment. So this circumstance shows, perhaps more than any other, the importance of the question of the meaning of suffering. It also shows how much care must be taken, both in dealing with the question itself and with all the possible answers to it. Why? Over the weekend, in 6 different cities in Iraq, are men, women, and children blown up while they're going to the store? Why are people going to a mall in Nairobi, Kenya, killed? Because they're not Muslim. What did they deserve? Why do the Arabs of the north of Sudan kill the Muslims who are black in Darfur? It has caused mass suffering. Those people don't deserve that. And this is something that is very, very difficult. We can't avoid these questions. Moreover, the first absolutely certain truth of our life, beyond the fact that we exist, is the inevitability of our death. Sometimes small children learn about it, but we don't want to introduce them to death too early. But no matter how much you delay it, they learn, especially by the time they start asking for pets like turtles and things, that death happens. And dogs die, and grandparents and others die, sometimes siblings, sometimes parents. And sometimes they themselves are sick. And all of us want to know how grievous it is when a small child has a deadly disease. You know, this is painful. But death is inevitable to every single one of us. None of us can avoid it. Given this unsettling fact, the search for a full answer is inescapable. We should desire to understand, even though the existentialist philosopher Heidegger had all kinds of problems with his life and such, but still, he forced his readers to deal with the question of the inevitability of death, and that people are moving towards their own death. And we have to face that. Each of us has both the desire and the duty to know the truth of our own destiny. We want to know if death will be the definitive end of our life. That's what a lot of, as a matter of fact, almost all atheists certainly assume that. They say, well, you die, that's it. You know, and oftentimes, I must say, some atheists deal with it, grapple with it, but a lot of atheists are very theoretical and even glib in dealing with that inevitability of death. Well, you die, it's all done, that's it. And then, of course, there are some people who, given the way they live, can only hope that it's all done at the end of their lives. And then also we wonder, is it possible to hope for an afterlife or not? Now, it seems that most human beings expect life after death. That's, you know, the majority opinion. And it is not insignificant that the death of Socrates, remember Socrates? He was falsely accused of atheism. He wasn't an atheist. He just didn't believe in all the gods. He came to understand that there is one God and not lots of these little gods. And so, and he used philosophy to come to that. But he was condemned to death in order to drink hemlock. And his friends told him to run away, but he said, no, that would not be living out the order. And his death gave philosophy a decisive orientation, because Socrates is a major turning point in Western philosophy. It's one of the very important people to read. And I hope you read his disciple Plato's works. And in fact, when you study the history of philosophy, you study the pre-Socratics. That's one whole age of philosophy. And then Socrates marks the transition to Plato and Aristotle and others. And so that's why it's a decisive orientation. And it's no less decisive now than it was in his day about 2,400 years ago. It is not by chance then that faced with the fact of death, philosophers again and again pose the question about the meaning of life. When one of their greatest minds chooses death rather than being incompatible with his philosophy, and who dies as a martyr to his own decisions and thoughts, then philosophers keep coming to this question about the meaning of life and immortality. And we cannot escape it today any more than they could. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back with some questions from our studio audience, your phoned in questions, and some emails. So please stay with us. Thank you very much and welcome back. First, I want to mention something that this month EWTN has reached a new milestone. EWTN television is now being carried on more than 5,000 television affiliates worldwide. This is amazing. And thanks to your help, EWTN recently launched in Salzburg, Austria. Also in dozens of Spanish-speaking countries, and in Hollywood's own backyard of Malibu and Burbank, California. Totally awesome, dudes. Thanks to your help, EWTN is now everywhere. It's just really growing. And, you know, it's, it helps you to realize that a lot of folks don't know. EWTN is broadcast 24 hours a day in Spanish for quite a number of years. Also, our radio programming is broadcast in Spanish. But we also are being broadcast in German 24 hours a day. And we've begun part-time French broadcasting. So it's amazing, the growth. And I've spoken to some of the folks in Germany, and they say that Mother Angelica's classics translate extremely well into German. They love her. They love her. And because even, though they hear her in German, they still see the look. Because she still has the facial expressions. And so they love her very, very much. Also, besides that good news, want to mention that if you have a chance to do as all these folks have done, which is to come here on pilgrimage, you are more than welcome. If you would contact our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966, or also go to the website EWTN.com. They will help you with all kinds of information about where to stay, scheduling of programs and masses, and how to get up to Hansville. We'd love to have you come here. Also, speaking of pilgrimage, I'm still planning to do a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, December 15th to the 26th. If you can join us, it'll be, just call 1-800-554-4556, or go to my website, fathermitchpacwa.org, and Father is spelled out. All right, now let's take some questions. We'll start off with Sue from Georgia. Hello, Sue.
Good morning, Father. I'm sorry, it's good afternoon. Oh, it's a joy to talk to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
With so much information.
Well, thank you.
I have two questions.
Sure.
I never believed in the Antichrist, and I have a non-Catholic friend, and she says he's already here on Earth. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know, what does that mean? And the second thing is, can you explain the Ark of the Covenant? And is it lost? And if they find it, does that mean it's the end of the world?
Okay, first of all, is your friend part of the Jehovah's Witnesses?
No. I think they're Baptist.
Oh, really? And they think that the Antichrist is already here?
Yes, and they said he will be coming on Earth. He is here, I think they said, in Austria.
Uh-huh.
And I never believed.
Well, we're broadcasting there. We'll tell him to stop. But first of all, Sue, that's very unusual that Baptists would hold that the Antichrist is already here. But it is common among the Jehovah's Witnesses and a few other groups. First of all, Sue, I would agree with your Baptist friend that the Antichrist is something that you do believe in. As a matter, this is scriptural revelation. Whether you're Catholic or Protestant, belief in the Antichrist is very important. But also, pay attention to 1 John chapter 4, which mentions that many antichrists have gone into the world. And so it's not only one. And this is something very, very important, that, we have a lot of characters that we could easily identify as Antichrist. For example, you've got Hitler, Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot. These are Antichrist people who did horrendous damage, hated the faith. They were all atheists who hated religion and tried to destroy it. Now, of course, the atheists try to say Hitler was a Catholic. Yes, he was when he was a little boy, but so are most of the atheists. And they don't identify themselves as Christian anymore. Well, Hitler, didn't believe in God at all and didn't have a moral compass and perpetrated horrendous evil. And of course, Stalin and Mao Zedong and Pol Pot pushed atheism and killed anybody who got in their way. This is Antichrist behavior. But we also believe that there will be an Antichrist at the end of all time who'll be worse than any of them. Now, secondly, in terms of the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Covenant was simply an acacia wood box that was covered with gold leaf, and inside of it was the Ten Commandments, also Aaron's staff, and a jar of manna. These are all inside of it. And it is lost and hasn't been found. A number of people say, oh, I saw it, but they never give pictures. They can never recover it. Oh, somebody hid it again from me, sorry. Yeah. That's a real case of a claim. When I see it, I'll believe it, okay? Finding it will not be the end of the world. After all, when Indiana Jones found it, it didn't end the world. Prepared the way for World War II, and the anti-Christian Nazi party certainly tried to get it, but this is nonsense. So that would be something that I wouldn't hold to. It'd be neat if we did find it, but that's all that we've got. Let's see here. I was looking for one email, but I can only see this one here. You have another caller? Hello, Gail?
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Oh, I thought they're telling me to look you up on an email, but you're right there. So where are you from, Gail?
Hi, Father Pacwa. It's so nice to talk to you.
Yeah, where are you from?
I'm calling from Michigan.
Great. And your question?
Okay, it's regarding the Pope's statement.
About?
That everyone can get into heaven. And it caused great distress between my brother and I, because he has fallen away from the church, and he was like mocking our religion. And the Pope said you don't have to be a Christian to go to heaven. And so I'm looking up on EWTN here and asking that question, and it says it's talking about what the Pope actually said. And I'll try to be as fast as I can.
Sure.
I don't have. We are. It says even the atheists. So he was saying all of us the Lord redeemed all of us. Yes, he did. Even the atheists. Yes, hoping that the atheists would, in my mind, turn to God and believe. And we all have a duty to do good, and we're all children of God, is what the Pope said. And the blood of Christ has redeemed us all. And the atheist says, but I don't believe, Father. I am an atheist. And his response was, but do good. We will meet one another there.
So what you want to do is say, now how can you explain that, right?
Yes, I think that there should have been more.
Oh, yes. And see, that's, I was talking to somebody who knew more about it than I, and there's no word-for-word transcript, or we don't know if there was even a recording, so we can check it. But here's, so we don't, and it was edited by La Repubblica, so I don't know if there was more that was taken out. So I just don't know that. But here's certainly a couple things. And I'll make mention about something to say to your brother. First of all, in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 and following, Jesus comes to judge the nations. Though that is, and the word would be the goyim, the ethne. These are the folks outside the faith. And they don't know that they're doing good things for Jesus. But whatever they do to the least of Jesus' brethren, they do to him. That's how he counts it. And there certainly are a number of atheists, for instance, who stay away from the faith because, and I'll bet your brother thinks this, that religion is the biggest cause of war. You hear that all the time, right? Gene, does your brother ever say that? Maybe she's not there. But at any rate, a lot of atheists do. And so they're afraid of religion because they're afraid that it causes so much war. And therefore, they don't want to believe. But they do want to be good people. And they're afraid that religion is too oriented towards power and things like that. So they don't, engage. Well, one of the things that would be the case here is that there are atheists in good conscience trying to avoid what they are taught is a bad thing, namely religion, and yet they want to do what's good for people, and they do help a lot of people. So our Lord says that he will count what they do to the least of his brethren as being done to him. However, again, you might remind your brother that what they don't do for the least of the brethren, Jesus also counts that they won't do for him. And that the people who don't know him and said, we didn't see you naked and so on. Said, yes, but you didn't do it to these my brethren. And what do? They said, oh, well, you can come to heaven anyway? No, they go to hell. So that they can also be condemned if they do evil. And I would suggest to your brother, being a wise guy about religion and being snarky will not go over real well. Because whenever you were snarky to your sister, you were snarky to me. And being snarky and arrogant about religion is a snarkiness to Jesus. So that won't, go. Now, clearly, what the Pope is talking about in dealing with a lifelong atheist who started La Repubblica newspaper to promote atheism. That was his goal. And he's trying to bring him around and bring him forward. But in the minds of a lot of folks, and this is again where I do wish he'd be a little more careful, is that, some people say, oh, then it doesn't matter. See, that's called indifferentism. And that was condemned very clearly and strongly at the Vatican Council and in the Catechism and so on. You can't say, well, then it doesn't matter. It does matter. But if somebody in their conscience can, has such fear or revulsion to religion because of what they think it is, then, Christ will judge them according to their conscience. Though again, as I've said to many of you, go to Hawaii.edu on the internet for the University of Hawaii. Hawaii.edu/powerkills. And you can see that the reality about, say, that death and war is caused by religion in the first 1900 years of the church account for 2 million people, as opposed to the atheists in the 20th century alone, accounting for close to 300 million. Religion is not the biggest cause of devastation and death and war. That is a flat-out falsehood that a lot of people just don't know. And it was anti-theistic government in France that committed genocide against their own people in the Vendée and other areas. And then it was in the name of the French Republic and an empire that Napoleon Bonaparte tried to spread these ideas to Europe, and 2 million people died just in his war of trying to spread his secular ideas. So in his war, as many people died as in the first 1800 years of Christianity. So it is not the faith that is dangerous. So that's very important. Now, we have an email here from Jean. Dear Father Mitch, my sister-in-law had a job in human relations for a major company, but quit because of their position of not allowing any conversation about the subject of homosexuality unless you supported it. She struggled with several underpaying jobs till she found the perfect job in the church. But now the priest in the parish where she works says he supports homosexual marriage. He said this at a diocesan meeting in the presence of the bishop and other priests, and no corrective measures have been taken. My sister-in-law feels angry, hopeless, and afraid. She'll lose her faith because bad is presented as good and good is bad. She doesn't know what to do or say or where to go for support. Jean. Jean, you know, that is something unconscionable. But we've been dealing with this for the last 40-some years. How many times have we seen clergy and religious unwilling to speak up against abortion? And how many times have we seen them speak up in favor of sex outside of marriage? And in fact, a lot of that goes back to the logic of the birth control issue. That when Pope Paul VI taught clearly about birth control, these folks denied it. And by the way, I urge you to actually read what Paul VI wrote in that encyclical Humanae Vitae. He warned that if this were neglected, there will be an increase of divorce, abuse of women, children born out of wedlock, homosexuality, and abortion. And, you know, I remember when I came out in 1968, I said, oh, no, that couldn't happen. You know, I said, you know, I thought he was overstating his case. However, I live many decades after he. And what he said was exactly true. And why? Because that priest and many others at that diocesan meeting separated procreation from this sexuality. And by that separation, they come up with another set of their own morals. And they don't see them going together. And as a result, they can hold that. It's, you know, Father Charles Curran, one of the big protesters against Humanae Vitae, went on all these issues. What I would say to your sister-in-law is, yes, this is horrible. But because these people have given up the morality that is inherently tied to our faith, if she goes up and gives up her faith, then the devil gets a 2-for-1 sale. He gets them to forego their faith and then gets her to be scandalized and leave too. What I suggest is that she learn to be more clever in teaching the truth about human sexuality and all, and have an impact on that diocese. I don't know where she's from. I have a suspicion, knowing where some of that is still accepted, but it's very rare. Most bishops will call them out. Secondly, I would write to the bishop and say, Excellency, I heard this and you said nothing. Why was that? And if His Excellency, the bishop of that diocese, says nothing, then send a copy of that letter to the Apostolic Nuncio in Washington. That's his boss. And see what goes from there. All right, we have another caller. Hello, Albert?
Yes, Father.
Yeah, what's your question?
Father, I've got several Protestant friends and non-denominational friends. They say that we, in chapter 1 of Ephesians, verse 4, they talk about predestination and about how that they claim that we existed before we were born with God. And they use the example of Jacob and Esau. And they say that Jacob, God hated Jacob and he loved Esau because Esau hated his heritage. How do I respond to that?
Well, okay, a couple things, Albert. First of all, there is, and if you take a look online, you can look up St. Augustine's book on predestination, okay, in which he taught that we are destined by God for salvation. Christ, and of course, he uses 1 Timothy 2 verse 4, that Christ died so that all men might be saved. That's the goal of Christ. And Catholic Church has taught from the earliest centuries that God gives enough grace for each individual, including the atheists we talked about before, to accept salvation. So that's a second point. A third point, though, is that God only has a destiny towards salvation. And what someone like John Calvin made a mistake on is to believe that God also predestines some people to hell. And the reason they hold that is because they deny that the will is able to say yes or no to God's grace. And they believe in the total depravity of the will, and therefore they can't decide. The Catholic Church says no, each person can decide and must. But God will give grace. And then St. Augustine also mentions that some individuals are given so much grace that it is difficult for them to refuse it. And they often become the great saints like Teresa of Avila. But he gives them that grace so as to show the rest of us who are not saints that we too can receive that grace. And the idea that we existed before we were conceived. Yeah, we exist before we're born. We're in our mother's wombs. But we don't exist before we are conceived. God creates the souls. That was a doctrine rejected at the Second Council of Constantinople and still rejected as nonsense. All right, I'm out of time. Thank you all for being here. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, we always like to remind you that this network is brought to you by you. We can be on 5,000 different cable carriers around the world with the help that you give us. So please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. Because we do have a lot of bills to pay. But it's doing it for the glory of God and the proclamation of the gospel. Thank you.